Get out. Paying our bills doesn't make you family, my dad roared on Thanksgiving. My mom whispered, you're just jealous of your sister's potential. I smiled back. Then let her potential pay the $10,500. That night, I cut them off completely. The next morning brought police, tears, and total chaos. I am Blythe. I am 32 years old, and my own father disowned me at the Thanksgiving dinner table for telling the truth. Before I tell you about the absolute chaos that followed, the police showing up, the repossessed car, and the frantic phone calls that changed all of our lives forever, let me know where you are watching from in the comments. It is comforting to know I am not alone in this, and sharing these stories helps us all heal. The air in my parents' dining room was thick enough to cut with a knife, not just with the scent of roasted turkey and cinnamon from the pumpkin pie, but with a tension that had been simmering for years. It clung to the floral wallpaper and settled in the silence between the forced pleasantries. On the surface, it was a perfect picture of a Midwest American Thanksgiving. But peace was a luxury our family could never afford. It had been that way for as long as I could remember. The first memory that surfaces when I think about my place in the family is not the big fights, but a gleaming red bicycle. It was a Schwinn, bright candy apple red with chrome fenders that shone like mirrors in the driveway. My younger sister, Delphine, got it for her 10th birthday. I remember this clearly because my 12th birthday had passed just 2 months earlier. Delphine had brought home a report card with 3 CS and AD in science. She got the beautiful red bike. 2 months prior, I had brought home a report card with straight A's, a letter of commendation from my history teacher, and I had won 2nd place in the state math competition. I proudly placed it on the kitchen counter. My mother, Vesta, barely glanced at it. She gave me a gentle pat on the head and a quiet, "That is nice, Blythe. Could you help fold the laundry?" Even as a young girl, I understood currency. Not just money, but the currency of love, of attention, of approval. In our house, all the currency flowed directly to Delphine. She was the charming one, the funny one, the one with endless potential. I was the responsible one, the quiet one, the one who just existed. I got the smaller bedroom at the end of the hall with the leaky window that let the winter chill in. Delphine got the large master bedroom overlooking the backyard. She got brand new clothes for every single school year, carefully picked out at the mall. I got her hand-me-downs if they were not too worn out or stained. I learned early on that the only way to get any sort of peace in that house was to excel, to be so incredibly self-sufficient that I never needed anything from them. It was an incredibly lonely way to grow up. I poured myself into my schoolwork and into computers. The logical, predictable world of coding made sense to me in a way my own family never did. 1 + 1 always equaled 2. Do the work, get the result. In my family, the math was always skewed. I could bring home a trophy, and Delphine could break a neighbor's window, and somehow I was the one who ended up feeling like I needed to apologize for taking up too much space. My parents were not monsters. They were just entirely blind to the dynamic they had created. My mother saw Delphine as an extension of her own unfulfilled dreams. Vesta had wanted to be an artist, and she saw Delphine's scattered energy, even when it led to nothing but messes on the living room rug, as a sign of creative genius. My father, Harlan, a man who worked a union job at an auto plant, saw Delphine's effortless charm as the key to a white-collar success he had never achieved. I, with my quiet diligence and predictable success, was just background noise. I was the reliable, sturdy furniture of the family. You do not praise a chair for holding you up. You just expect it to. I accepted it. For years, I accepted it as my role. I told myself it was fine. I told myself that one day they would see me, that one day my achievements would be too big to ignore. The scars from that childhood whispered to me in the dead of night, telling me that I was not enough, and that my worth was entirely conditional. The family dynamic solidified into a literal financial nightmare the year I turned 18. That was the year the auto plant had massive layoffs. Harlan, with 25 years on the assembly line, was suddenly out of a job. His pride, which was already a fragile thing, shattered completely. He never really recovered. He took odd jobs here and there, but the steady provider he once was disappeared, replaced by a bitter, resentful man who spent his days watching daytime television in his recliner. Desta's part-time job as a dental receptionist was not nearly enough to keep the household afloat. That same year, I was accepted into a top engineering program. There was no celebration. There was no dinner out. There was certainly no college fund for me. It was just quietly understood that I was on my own. So, I did what I had to do. I worked. I worked 3 jobs while carrying a full course load. I woke up at 4 in the morning to work as a barista, my hands smelling constantly of roasted espresso beans and sour milk. In the afternoons, I pushed heavy carts of dusty books as a library assistant. On weekends, I delivered pizzas, my car smelling permanently of grease and pepperoni. I survived on cheap instant noodles and caffeine. My eyes were constantly burning from sheer exhaustion. Sleep was a luxury I simply could not afford. Meanwhile, Delphine was graduating high school. Her grades were completely abysmal, but she suddenly decided she wanted to go to a private business school, one with a massive price tag. I remember coming home late one night, my feet aching from standing for 10 hours, and overhearing them in the kitchen. I watched in absolute disbelief as my parents, who constantly complained about being completely broke to me, signed the paperwork to take out a second mortgage on their house to pay for Delphine's tuition. Harlan looked up, his eyes avoiding mine as I stood in the doorway holding my uniform. "It is an investment in her future, Blythe," he said gruffly. I did not say a single word. I felt a hot flash crawl up my neck, but I swallowed it down. I just walked back to my tiny rented room, ate a packet of ramen, and studied until my vision blurred. The message was crystal clear. My future was my own problem. Hers was their priority. 4 years later, I graduated with honors. I had multiple job offers before I even had my diploma in my hand. By the age of 24, I was living in a nice apartment in the city, working as a software developer for a major financial technology company, and earning a 6-figure salary. The relief was immense. I bought a comfortable couch. I filled my refrigerator with fresh produce instead of instant noodles. For the first time in my life, I felt secure. I could finally breathe. That is exactly when the phone calls started. At first, it was very subtle. "Oh, Blythe, the water heater broke completely this morning. The basement is flooded. I just do not know how we are going to manage," my mother would sigh into the phone, her voice trembling. I sent them $1,000 that same afternoon. Then it was, "Your father's car needs new tires to pass inspection, but we just cannot swing it this month." I paid the bill over the phone directly to the mechanic. What started as occasional assistance for real emergencies quickly became a regular, expected routine. Within a year, the random requests had morphed into a structured, unspoken agreement. I found myself paying their $950 monthly mortgage payment. I was covering the $400 in utilities. I took over the $700 payments on their 2 cars. It was honestly easier to just set up automatic payments from my checking account than to have the exact same stressful, guilt-tripping conversation every single month. They never directly asked me to take over their entire lives. It just happened. It was a leaky pipe of need that I kept plugging with my money, until I realized I was not plugging a leak at all. I was the entire water supply, and they had absolutely no intention of ever turning off the tap. My best friend, Marnie, saw it all happening. We had been friends since college, sharing a tiny dorm room and surviving on a budget of practically zero. She knew my history, and she saw the pattern repeating itself, just with much bigger numbers. "They are taking advantage of you, Blythe," Marnie told me one night. We were sitting in my living room, sharing a bottle of wine. I had just gotten off the phone with Vesta, who called to tell me about a landscaping bill they could not cover. I had already transferred the funds before sitting back down. "It is just until my dad gets back on his feet," I mumbled, staring at my glass. I knew I sounded pathetic. Harlan had not seriously looked for a job in over 5 years. Marnie pointed to a large glass jar on my kitchen counter where I dumped my loose change and small bills. "What do you call that?" she asked. "My emergency fund jar," I said. "No," she corrected me, her eyes dead serious. "That is your guilt jar. Every single time you feel guilty for having a good life, a life they do not have, you throw money at them. You would be far better off spending that money on a therapist, Blythe. You are enabling them." I knew she was right. But hearing it and accepting it are two very different things. I was trapped in an endless cycle of hope and obligation. I genuinely thought that if I just gave enough, if I was successful enough, if I was good enough, one day they would finally look at me and say, "Thank you. We see you. We are proud of you." That hope was a fantasy, a carrot I dangled in front of myself to justify the massive financial sacrifice. The examples of their ingratitude were relentless. They were like little paper cuts that slowly, agonizingly bled me dry. For my mother's 60th birthday, I wanted to do something incredibly special. I spent $2,000 on a weekend trip to Chicago for the three of us. I booked a beautiful suite at a luxury downtown hotel. I secured premium tickets to a Broadway show she had always wanted to see. I made reservations at an upscale Italian restaurant. I drove them there, paid for every meal, and tried to create the perfect family weekend. When we got back to their house, my Aunt Odette had stopped by. Odette asked Vesta how the big birthday trip was. "Oh, we had a nice time," Vesta said dismissively, waving her hand. She then immediately turned her body toward Odette, her face lighting up. "But Odette, you absolutely must see the card Delphine made for me." She used real glitter and hand-lettered the entire poem. "It is just so thoughtful. That girl has such a beautiful soul." I stood in the hallway, holding their heavy suitcases. The $2,000, the meticulous planning, the time taken off work, all of it was completely erased by a piece of folded construction paper and some glue. I just placed the bags by the stairs and walked out to my car. A few years later, Harlan needed a major knee replacement surgery. It was a serious operation with a long, painful recovery. Vesta claimed she was too frail to lift him, so I took 2 full weeks of unpaid leave from my job to go back to my childhood home and take care of him. For 14 days, my life revolved around his recovery. I cooked all his meals. I scrubbed the floors. I drove him to every physical therapy appointment, waiting in the sterile lobby for hours. I helped him in and out of the shower, dealing with the smell of medicinal soap and bandages. It was physically and emotionally exhausting. All he did was complain. The soup I made was always too salty. I was driving over the speed bumps too fast. I fluffed his pillows too aggressively. One afternoon, I was trying to adjust the ice pack on his swollen knee. He yanked his leg away, looking at me with pure, unfiltered annoyance. "Delphine would have done this better," he snapped, glaring at me. "She actually knows how I like things done. You are too rough." I froze. I stared at the ice pack in my hands, feeling the freezing cold seep into my palms. Delphine had not visited him a single time since the surgery. She claimed she was too busy networking for her latest venture. I just set the ice pack on the table, walked into the kitchen, and stared blankly at the wall. The silence of the house pressed down on me. My sister Delphine lived her life like a perpetual motion machine powered exclusively by terrible ideas. It was almost impressive in a twisted way. She did not just fail, she failed spectacularly, leaving a massive trail of debt and broken promises in her wake. Yet, she always emerged from the wreckage with her self-confidence completely intact. Her first major venture, after dropping out of the expensive private business school my parents mortgaged their house for, was an online dropshipping business selling organic bamboo phone cases. She spent 6 solid months building a flashy website and ordering expensive business cards, entirely convinced she was a young tech mogul. The business lasted exactly until her first credit card statement arrived. She had spent thousands of dollars on social media advertising with a total return of about $75. When I gently tried to offer some advice on targeted marketing over a phone call, she scoffed loudly into the receiver. "You do not get the startup grind, Blythe. You are just a corporate drone. You do not have the mindset." The business folded weeks later. Vesta patted her back and called it a valuable learning experience. Next came the gourmet fusion taco truck. This was her passion project for an entire year. She talked endlessly about the menu. She paid a graphic designer hundreds of dollars to create a logo. She even bought a ridiculous, personalized chef's hat. The only thing she never managed to actually acquire was the food truck itself. The startup costs were too high, she complained. That venture died silently, leaving behind nothing but a drawer full of unused custom napkins with her taco logo printed on them. Then came the cryptocurrency phase. This one was by far the most damaging. She had watched a few online videos and suddenly declared herself a financial investment guru. She convinced my parents that she was on the verge of making millions and that they needed to get in on the ground floor. I later found out she had taken over $15,000 of their remaining retirement savings and dumped it into a coin that plummeted to zero overnight. I remember the phone call I had with Vesta when I found out. I was pacing my living room, my voice raised. "Mom, she lost everything. How could you give her that money?" I demanded. "I have a friend who went through a terrible divorce and fought a bitter custody battle for her children. Her legal lawyer fees for that entire nightmare were less than what Delphine had just evaporated in a single day." Vesta defended her fiercely. "You have to take risks to get rewards, Blythe. Delphine has real vision. You just do not understand high finance. My stable career, the very salary that was quietly keeping a roof over their heads, paying their bills, and ensuring they had electricity, was never described as having vision. It was treated like a basic public utility." The grand finale of Delphine's business eras, right before the holiday explosion, was an artisanal subscription box service for dogs. It collapsed after 3 months, leaving her owing $15,000 to angry local suppliers. Vesta called me on a Tuesday evening. Her voice was trembling with manufactured panic. "It is an absolute family crisis, Blythe," she pleaded. "The suppliers are threatening to take her to small claims court. We have to help her. We need $15,000 by Friday." I sat on my couch, the television muted in the background. I pulled up my own banking app on my phone. I had money saved. I had been quietly building a fund, thinking about my own future. Maybe buying a house. Maybe just having a safety net, an emergency fund, or even a funeral fund, because I knew for a fact that if anything happened to me, my family would not contribute a single dime. I took a deep breath. My heart hammered in my chest. "No," I said. The line went completely dead quiet. "What did you say?" Vesta asked, her voice dropping to frantic act instantly. "I said no, Mom. I cannot do it. I am trying to plan for my own future. I cannot keep bailing her out of these messes." The reaction was immediate and brutal. Vesta hung up on me. For the next 3 weeks, I received the ultimate silent treatment. Harlan stopped answering my Sunday afternoon calls entirely. Vesta would only send me one-word text messages if I asked a direct question. The message they were sending was impossible to misunderstand. My value as a daughter was directly and exclusively tied to my willingness to open my wallet and fund my sister's failures. I ignored Marnie's warnings. I ignored the glaring evidence right in front of my own eyes. All because I was still chasing that little pat on the head from 2 decades ago. The week before Thanksgiving, I got the news I had been working relentlessly toward for years. I had successfully managed a massive, high-stakes software migration project at my firm. My CEO, Vance, called me into his corner office. The heavy leather chair squeaked as I sat down. Vance smiled warmly across his wide desk. "Blythe, the board is incredibly impressed. Not only is your year-end bonus going to be substantial, but we are finalizing the paperwork for a major promotion. You are moving up to the executive suite after the new year. For the first time in a very long time, I felt a pure, uncomplicated sense of pride. I had earned this with my own sweat and tears. I walked out of that office feeling 10 feet tall. That exact same evening, my phone buzzed. It was Vesta. I answered cautiously, expecting more of the cold shoulder. Instead, her voice was sweeter than honey. Blythe, honey. How are you doing? I was just thinking about you. I am fine, Mom, I said, leaning against my kitchen counter. You know, I was thinking, she continued, her tone light and breezy. You have that beautiful, big apartment in the city and that lovely modern kitchen. Why do you not host Thanksgiving this year? It would be such a wonderful treat for your father and me to not have to do all the cooking and cleaning for once. I was immediately suspicious. They had not set foot in my apartment in over 2 years. But the amazing news from work had made me feel generous. The old, foolish part of my brain whispered that maybe this was their way of extending an olive branch. Maybe they wanted to celebrate. Sure, Mom, I said slowly. I can do that. It will be nice. Oh, wonderful, she gushed enthusiastically. It will be so cozy. Just the 4 of us, a real family dinner. And it will be a perfect chance for you and Delphine to really talk. She has this incredible new app idea. It is just brilliant, Blythe. She would love to pitch it to you and get your thoughts. And there it was. The sharp metal hook hidden inside the sweet bait. It was never about family. It was never about giving her a break from cooking. It was a calculated business pitch. They wanted to corner me on my own turf, manipulate the spirit of holiday generosity, and pressure me into funding Delphine's next guaranteed failure. The realization felt like a bucket of ice water dumped over my head. I gripped the edge of the counter, keeping my voice perfectly even. We can talk about whatever she wants, Mom, I said carefully. But I have to be completely honest with you up front. My finances are a little tight right now with the holidays coming up. I will not be investing in any new projects. It was a lie, of course. My bank accounts were healthier than ever. But it was a necessary lie. I needed to set a firm boundary before they walked through my door. The artificial warmth in Vesta's voice evaporated in a microsecond. Oh, she said, her tone suddenly clipped and hard. Well. Okay. I will talk to your father and call you back. She hung up. I stood in my kitchen, staring at the blank screen of my phone, feeling a familiar ache in my chest. She called back exactly 1 hour later. Change of plans, she announced briskly, sounding like a manager giving orders. Your father feels it is just better if we have Thanksgiving here at our house. Tradition, you know. It is too much of a hassle to drive into the city. Just bring a side dish. See you at 3 on Thursday. Click. She hung up again. The bait and switch was so blatantly obvious it was insulting. They had tried to set a trap. When I did not walk blindly into it, they immediately retreated to their own territory where they had the home field advantage and total control. They instantly demoted me from the honored host to a mere guest who was expected to bring a contribution. A smart, rational part of me wanted to call back and say I was not coming at all. I wanted to spend Thanksgiving with Marnie, eating takeout and watching movies. But another, older part of me, the 12-year-old girl still desperate for her mother to look at her, could not do it. So, on Wednesday night, I went to the upscale grocery store. I walked down the brightly lit aisles, picking out the most expensive heavy cream, fresh organic green beans, and imported cheeses. I spent over $200 on ingredients for a gourmet casserole and a rich pumpkin cheesecake. I would show up. I would play the part of the good daughter. I would endure whatever came next. It was a decision that would permanently alter the course of my entire life. I walked into my parents' house on Thanksgiving Day balancing a heavy glass pie dish in one hand and a shopping bag in the other. The smell of roasted turkey and sage stuffing was welcoming, but the atmosphere in the room was anything but warm. Vesta gave me a brief, tight-lipped hug at the door. Harlan merely grunted a hello from his recliner, his eyes locked on the loud football game blaring from the television. I placed the expensive wine I brought on the kitchen counter. Nobody thanked me. Delphine, however, was practically vibrating with nervous excitement. She was dressed in a sharp blazer, pacing the living room like she was preparing to step onto a stage. She was ready to pitch her masterpiece. Dinner was finally served. We sat around the heavy oak dining table. I scooped mashed potatoes onto my plate, dreading the moment the performance would begin. It did not take long. "It is not just a fitness app," Delphine announced loudly, gesturing wildly with a buttered dinner roll. "It is a complete lifestyle revolution. It uses AI to track your emotional state and adjust your workout. We are talking major celebrity endorsements. Brand partnerships. The earning potential is absolutely limitless." "It sounds simply amazing, sweetie," Vesta cooed, reaching over to pat Delphine's hand. "You have your grandfather's true entrepreneurial spirit." My grandfather had owned a small, successful local hardware store where he worked 60-hour weeks. Comparing his grit to Delphine's delusions was an insult to his memory. Harlan nodded gravely, pointing his fork at her. "This is the one, Delphine. I can feel it in my bones. This is your big break." They went on to proudly discuss how they were planning to invest what little was left of their retirement savings into this app. The very same savings that had already been decimated by Delphine's crypto disaster. I felt a sudden, sharp surge of panic. Not for myself, but for them. They were going to lose absolutely everything, including the house that I was currently paying for. I set my fork down. I tried to be gentle. I tried to frame my words as professional advice from someone who had spent nearly a decade working inside the tech industry. "The app market is incredibly saturated right now, Delphine," I started, keeping my tone neutral. "User acquisition costs are sky high. Even with a great idea, you need a multi-million-dollar marketing budget just to get noticed in the App Store. Do you have a concrete plan for that kind of funding?" Vesta slammed the heavy ceramic gravy boat down onto the table. Gravy sloshed over the side, staining the white tablecloth. "Blythe, please," Vesta hissed, her face contorting with anger. "Can you not do this today? Can you not tear your sister down for just one single day?" "I am not tearing her down, Mom," I said, my heart starting to beat faster. "I am asking legitimate, basic business questions. This is my actual field of work. I know what I am talking about." "Oh, of course you do," Vesta sneered, rolling her eyes dramatically. "Miss Big Shot from the city. Coming down here to tell us poor folks how the world works. You think just because you make a good salary, you are somehow better than all of us." That was the exact moment the dam broke. 8 years. 8 long years of biting my tongue until it bled. 8 years of swallowing my frustration, of smiling through the disrespect. 8 years of paying, and paying, and paying for absolutely nothing in return. It all came rushing up my throat like bile. Better than you? No. But more responsible? Yes, I shot back, my voice rising above its normal pitch. My hands were shaking, gripping the edge of the table. The dining room went completely still. Delphine's mouth hung open. "I know what I am talking about because my boring, uncreative job has been paying the mortgage on this house for 8 years. I yelled, the truth finally tearing out of me. I pointed across the table at Vesta. "It paid for the car you drove to the grocery store today, Mom. It pays for the electricity that cooked this very turkey. And it has paid for every single one of her failed, ridiculous visions." I gestured wildly toward Delphine, who shrank back into her chair. The silence that followed was heavy and deafening. It was the very first time the unspoken, ugly truth had ever been dragged out into the light and spoken aloud at that table. Harlan's face, which had been slowly darkening, was now a mask of pure, unadulterated fury. The veins in his neck bulged against his collar. He rose slowly from his chair, his large frame towering over the table, a portrait of deeply wounded, toxic pride. He pointed a trembling, thick finger directly at my face. "Get out," he roared. The sheer volume of his voice rattled the crystal glasses on the table. And in that moment, the final fracture, the crack that had been slowly spreading through the foundation of our family for over 2 decades, finally snapped, bringing the whole house down on top of us. The moment the words left my mouth, the dining room felt like a vacuum. For nearly a decade, our family had operated under a fragile, unspoken, and deeply toxic contract. They would pretend they were entirely self-sufficient, and I would pretend I was just helping out with minor inconveniences. They would lavish endless praise on Delphine's imaginary business successes, and I would quietly pay the hard cash for her very real, catastrophic failures. We all played our specific parts in this sad, dysfunctional stage play, but I had just thrown the entire script directly into the blazing fireplace. I looked around the table at their faces. Delphine looked as if I had physically slapped her across the cheek. Her mouth was hanging open, and her eyes darted nervously between our parents. Vesta's expression was a twisted mixture of profound shock and deep outrage, as if I had uttered the most profane blasphemy imaginable in a sacred place. But it was Harlan's face that truly scared me for a brief second. My father looked utterly betrayed. Not because I was wrong, but because I was absolutely right, and I had dared to speak the truth out loud. I had completely exposed the massive lie that held his fragile, masculine ego together. "All these years," I said, my voice shaking heavily with a potent mix of boiling anger and agonizing grief. "All these years I worked myself to the bone. Not just for me. For you. For this entire family. When Dad lost his job, who stepped up? When Delphine needed an expensive tuition, who was told to just figure it out on her own so you could mortgage this very house for her? Who pays for the emergencies? Who pays for the day-to-day survival? It was me." Vesta found her voice first, her tone sharp and defensive. "We never asked you for any of it, Blythe," she hissed. It was a blatant, bold-faced lie. "You did not have to directly ask," I exclaimed, my voice getting much louder, echoing off the dining room walls. "You would just sigh into the telephone about a massive bill you could not pay, and you knew exactly what you were doing. You manipulated me with pure guilt, and the saddest part is that I let you do it." I turned my burning gaze to Delphine. "And you? You just took it all. You let me pay for your life while you chased one ridiculous fantasy after another. And you never, not once, said thank you. You just thought you were inherently entitled to my salary." Delphine shrank further back into her wooden chair, completely unable to meet my eyes. She had absolutely no defense because there was none to give. We all knew it was the absolute truth. The air crackled with the heavy weight of it. For the first time in my 32 years of life, I was not the quiet, accommodating, invisible daughter. I was a creditor calling in a massive debt. It was not just a financial debt, but an emotional one. A debt of recognition, of gratitude, of simple human respect. And judging from the furious looks on their faces, it was a debt they had absolutely no intention of ever repaying. Harlan's rage was just the violent confirmation of that fact. He could not face the ugly truth of his own failures as a provider, so he did the only thing he knew how to do. He decided to completely erase me from the equation. His roar of "get out" echoed in the sudden, ringing silence of the room. His large, calloused hand was still pointing directly at the front door, trembling with pure adrenaline. His entire body shook with a fury that seemed to come from a place far deeper than just temporary anger. It was the fury of a fallen king whose absolute authority had just been challenged by a peasant. "Harlan, please," Vesta whispered weakly, putting a manicured hand on his flannel sleeve. But he shook her off violently. His eyes, burning with a toxic mix of deep shame and explosive rage, were locked dead on me. "You ungrateful brat," he spat, his voice low, gravelly, and incredibly dangerous. After everything we have done for you. Raising you. Putting a solid roof over your head. You dare to come into my house and throw your money in my face? Your house? I repeated, the sheer absurdity of his statement giving me a very strange, chilling sense of calm. Dad, the bank owns this house. And I am the one who pays the bank every single month. That was the final blow. That was the ultimate insult his fragile pride simply could not endure. Paying our bills does not make you family, he bellowed, slamming his heavy fist down on the table so hard the silverware clattered and Vesta let out a small, terrified shriek. It makes you a landlord. And I am kicking you out of my home. I am completely done with you. Vesta, seeing her beautiful dream of Delphine's new app funding permanently evaporate right before her very eyes, chimed in with her own special brand of emotional poison. She leaned forward, her voice dropping to a nasty, conspiratorial whisper that was somehow much louder than Harlan's deafening shouting. You are just jealous of your sister's potential, she said, her eyes turning cold, hard, and utterly ruthless. You always have been jealous of her. You have this stable, boring, lonely life, and Delphine actually dares to dream big, and you just cannot stand it. You desperately want her to fail so you can feel superior. I looked at them. I really, truly looked at them for the first time without the rose-colored glasses of a desperate daughter. The father I had once revered and sought approval from was now just a broken, bitter man hiding behind loud rage. The mother I had always tried to please, the woman I wanted so badly to hug me, was now a complete stranger whose love was clearly, undeniably conditional. And my sister, the source of this entire financial collapse, was sitting silently, letting our aging parents fight her battles for her. And in that exact moment, the deep hurt, the burning anger, the decades of pathetic longing for their approval, it all just vanished. It was like watching a movie about someone else's miserable life. All that was left inside my chest was a profound, empty sadness and a startling, crystal-clear clarity. I let out a short, humorless laugh. They stared at me as if I had completely lost my mind. I slowly and deliberately picked up my heavy winter coat from the back of my dining chair. You know what? You are exactly right, I said, my voice completely level. The eerie calm in my own voice surprised even me. I am not family. I am a bank. I looked my father dead in his furious eyes. And this bank is officially closing its doors tonight. Then I looked at my mother, who was glaring at me with pure venom. And you are right too, Mom. I am jealous. But I am not jealous of Delphine's potential. I am jealous that she actually got a mother and a father, and I just got this. I turned my back on them and walked purposefully toward the front door. You leave this table right now. Harlan's voice, now hoarse and cracking, called after me down the hallway. And do not you even bother coming back for Christmas. You are no longer my daughter. I paused with my hand resting on the cold brass doorknob. But I did not look back. I did not shed a single tear. Do not worry, I said loudly, pulling the heavy wooden door open to the freezing November night air. I will not. And I walked out, closing the door quietly and firmly behind me on my entire life up to that point. The freezing winter air hit me like a physical blow, instantly snapping me out of the surreal, hazy nightmare of the dining room. I stumbled down the concrete walkway to my car, my hands shaking so badly from the adrenaline crash that I could barely get the electronic key fob to unlock the doors. I fell into the driver's seat and slammed the door shut, enclosing myself in the dark, silent cabin of my vehicle. I did not start the engine. I just sat there in the pitch-black cold. The absolute silence of the car was a stark, jarring contrast to the violent shouting match that was still ringing loudly in my ears. My heart was hammering violently against my ribs. You are no longer my daughter. The cruel words echoed on an endless loop in my head. I sat there waiting for the grief to hit. I expected to feel devastated. I expected to be sobbing uncontrollably over the steering wheel, mourning the death of my family. But I just felt numb. A deep, cold, hollow numbness spread from my chest out to my fingertips. For my entire existence, I had contorted myself into impossible emotional knots trying to win their basic approval. I had sacrificed my youth, my peace of mind, and my hard-earned money. And in the span of just 5 minutes over a turkey dinner, it had all been mercilessly burned to the ground. My hand automatically reached into my purse for my phone. The screen illuminated my face in the dark car. I dialed Marnie. It was Thanksgiving evening, and I knew she was at her parents' house, but I needed an anchor. She answered on the second ring. "Hey babe, happy Thanksgiving," Marnie said, her voice warm and cheerful in the background of clinking glasses. "How is it going with the fam? Did Delphine pitch her latest scam yet?" "They disowned me," I cut her off. The words sounded incredibly foreign, heavy, and totally absurd as I spoke them aloud. There was a long, heavy pause on the other end of the line. The background noise seemed to mute. "What? Blythe, what exactly happened?" I recounted the entire dinner conversation. My voice was completely flat and devoid of emotion, like I was reading a dry legal document or a police report. I detailed the app pitch, my logical business questions, Vesta's vicious accusations of jealousy, Harlan's explosive rage, and the final, banishing words that severed our bloodline. When I finally finished speaking, Marnie was quiet for a long moment. I could hear her breathing steadily into the receiver. Then she said, "Good." I blinked in the darkness, completely bewildered. "What do you mean, good?" "I just lost my entire family." "I mean, good for you, Blythe," she said, her voice firm, entirely lacking the pity I expected. "They finally showed you exactly who they really are without any masks. They handed you your freedom on a silver platter. You are completely free, Blythe. You just do not feel it yet because you are in shock. So, the only question that matters right now is, what are you going to do next?" The question hung heavily in the cold air of the car. What was I going to do? For nearly a decade, my entire financial and emotional life had been strictly dictated by their sudden needs, their manufactured emergencies, and their endless desires. Now, there was absolutely nothing. A massive, terrifying, beautiful blank slate. I told them. I said slowly, a brilliant, terrifying idea taking firm root in the frozen landscape of my mind. I told them that the bank was closing. "Then close it," Marnie said simply. Her voice was like steel. "Do not just say it to sound tough. Actually do it. Do it tonight, right this second, before you drive home and have a chance to second-guess yourself. Cut the cord before your mother calls you tomorrow morning crying with some fake apology to get you to pay the December mortgage. Cut it all off, Blythe. For real this time." Her words were like a heavy switch flipping in my brain. The fog of numbness instantly evaporated. She was absolutely right. If I drove home, if I slept on it, the guilt would inevitably creep back in. This could not be just an empty threat thrown in the heat of an argument. It had to be a concrete promise. A permanent promise to myself to protect my own life. I took a deep, freezing breath, watching my breath fog up the windshield. "Okay," I said, a new, fierce energy coursing through my veins. "Okay, Marnie. I am going to do it right now." I hung up the phone. The crushing numbness was entirely replaced by a massive surge of pure adrenaline. I reached over and pulled my silver laptop from my leather work bag on the passenger seat. I opened it, balancing the cold metal steadily on my steering wheel. I turned on my mobile hotspot on my phone and connected the laptop. The bright blue glow of the screen illuminated the dark interior of the car, casting long shadows across my face. First, I opened my web browser and went straight to the online banking portal. I typed in my credentials and logged in. There it was, sitting on the main dashboard, the scheduled automatic monthly payment to Harlan and Vesta's mortgage account. $950, scheduled to be withdrawn in just 4 days. My index finger hovered over the trackpad, resting right on the Cancel Recurring Payment button. For one single second, my breath caught in my throat. This was incredibly real. This was the absolute point of no return. If I clicked this, they would lose the house within months. I remembered Harlan's face. "You are no longer my daughter." I clicked the button. A small, gray pop-up box appeared on the screen, asking, "Are you sure you want to cancel this payment?" I firmly clicked yes. The payment line entirely disappeared from the scheduled list. Instantly, a massive, crushing weight that I did not even fully realize I had been carrying on my shoulders for 8 years simply lifted away into the night air. Next came the utility companies. I opened a new tab for the electric company. Log in. Billing. Auto pay. Click. Cancelled. I opened the gas company website. Log in. Payment settings. Click. Cancelled. The municipal water bill. The high-speed internet that Delphine used to research her ridiculous ventures. The premium cable television package that Harlan sat and watched all day long. Click. 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 Every single click of the mouse was a loud, definitive declaration of my own independence. It was incredibly methodical, almost clinical. I felt a strange, beautiful detachment, like a highly skilled surgeon performing a necessary amputation to save the rest of the healthy body. Then came the car payments. I logged into the auto loan financing website. There were 2 vehicles listed on the dashboard, Harlan's truck and Vesta's sedan. Both vehicles were legally in my parents' names, but they were entirely funded by my checking account routing number. I went into the payment profiles, deleted my bank account information completely, and canceled the auto drafts. They would have to figure out how to pay the $700 next week, or the repo men would be coming. I did not stop there. I went after the streaming accounts. The Netflix, the Hulu, the Max subscriptions, all registered under my personal email address and charged directly to my credit card. I went into the security settings for every single platform. I clicked Sign out of all devices and immediately changed all the passwords to a random string of numbers and letters. I meticulously combed through my recent credit card statements, hunting down any recurring charges linked to their suburban address. The expensive home security system. The bi-weekly lawn care service. The premium grocery delivery membership Vesta loved using. I systematically canceled every single one of them. Each action was a heavy iron link in a chain, and I was severing them one by one. I was entirely dismantling the massive financial infrastructure of my own servitude. This was not about petty revenge. It was about survival. It was about finally taking back the life, the energy, and the resources I had almost completely given away to people who despised me. If you've made it this far, please do me a favor, like the video, and comment number 1 down below. It lets me know how awesome you are and shows that you're right here with me on this journey. Your support is a massive encouragement and truly motivates me. Drop that one so I can recognize you, and now, let's get back to my story. I leaned back against the leather headrest, breathing heavily. The laptop felt warm against my legs. I had just canceled the very last subscription, a fancy monthly coffee bean delivery service my mother adored. It was finished. I was completely, financially free. I was just about to close the laptop and finally start the car engine to drive home when my phone buzzed loudly in the cup holder with a new email notification. I glanced at the screen, assuming it was just another automated confirmation email from one of the dozen services I had just successfully canceled. But the sender's name made my heart skip a beat and caused me to pause. It was from Vance, the CEO of my technology firm. The subject line simply read, "The next chapter." My heart gave a little, nervous jolt. This was highly unusual. A direct, personal email from the chief executive officer at 10 o'clock at night on the Thanksgiving holiday? I picked up the phone, my curiosity completely piqued. I opened the email. The message was relatively brief, but the words glowing on the screen seemed to instantly rearrange the gravity of my entire world. Subject, the next chapter. Blythe, I know it is a major holiday and you are likely with your family, but I simply could not wait until Monday morning to share the official news with you. The final legal papers for the corporate acquisition were signed late this afternoon. As of tomorrow morning, our firm is officially part of the larger global tech conglomerate. As we discussed briefly in my office, this marks a massive new beginning for all of us. I have attached the finalized, legally binding documents regarding your new role as Vice President of Engineering for the newly integrated division. Your official promotion, along with the substantial salary increase, is effective immediately. Most importantly, I have also attached the initial financial valuation report. Per the specific terms of your senior partnership agreement you signed 3 years ago, your vested company stock options have now been fully converted to liquid assets. I will let you look at the exact numbers yourself in the PDF, but congratulations, Blythe. You have more than earned every single penny of this. Enjoy the rest of your holiday weekend. Big things are ahead. Best, Vance. My hand started to shake violently again, but this time for a completely different reason. I quickly tapped on the securely attached document. It was a password-protected PDF file. I typed in my employee identification code, and the dense financial document opened on my screen. It was a complex spreadsheet full of legal and financial jargon, but my eyes scanned down and found the relevant line item almost instantly. Blythe, converted equity value. And sitting right next to my name was a number. A staggering, life-altering number. It was a number with a comma, and 6 zeros rolling out after it. In fact, the first digit was not a 1. It was well into the multi-millions. I dropped the phone into my lap and stared blankly out the icy windshield at the dark, familiar suburban street where my parents' house stood just 100 yards away. Inside that warm, brightly lit house, they were probably still fuming with anger. They were probably sitting around the ruins of the turkey dinner, proudly congratulating themselves on kicking out their arrogant, ungrateful daughter who thought she was a landlord. They were undoubtedly consoling Delphine, petting her hair, and reassuring her that her brilliant, imaginary fitness app would be their ultimate financial salvation. They had just officially disowned me. They had looked me in the eye and told me I was not family. They had violently thrown me out into the cold over my refusal to hand over a few $1,000s a month for a scam. And they had absolutely no idea. They had no idea that they had just aggressively severed ties with the one single person who had not only been keeping them from living on the street, but who was now, as of this very afternoon, officially a multimillionaire. The year-end cash bonus I had been so happy about earlier that week was essentially nothing. It was a mere rounding error compared to the massive corporate buyout I was now a part of. The profound, crushing irony of the situation was so incredibly thick it was almost comical. I felt a bubble of emotion rise in my chest. I started to laugh. It started as a small, breathy chuckle, but it quickly grew. It bubbled up into a full-blown, chest-heaving, tear-streaming, hysterical laugh that filled the small cabin of my car. It was the loud, unrestrained laugh of a woman who had just witnessed the most absurd, tragic, and liberating moment of her entire existence. They had not just disowned a daughter. They had not just disowned a personal bank. They had proudly and arrogantly thrown their actual winning lottery ticket directly into the garbage shredder because they were entirely too busy putting all their blind faith in a lottery ticket that was proven to be completely blank. The heavy laughter eventually subsided, leaving a strange, beautiful, quiet peace in its wake. All the residual pain, all the lingering doubt about whether I had done the right thing by canceling the bills, it all evaporated into the cold night. Their decision to kick me out was not just emotionally cruel. From a purely practical, survival standpoint, it was catastrophically, unbelievably stupid. And it was the ultimate, undeniable confirmation that they never actually saw me. They only ever saw a useful resource. And because they could not see my true value, they had just permanently lost access to it in every conceivable sense of the word. I confidently pushed the ignition button. The car engine hummed smoothly to life, the heater blowing warm air over my freezing hands. I put the car in drive, and for the first time in my life, I was not just driving away from their house. I was driving directly toward my own beautiful, unburdened future. I woke up late the next morning on the plush velvet couch in my own apartment, feeling incredibly strange. My neck was slightly stiff from falling asleep awkwardly, and a dull headache pulsed softly behind my eyes from the emotional hangover. For a very disorienting, confusing moment, I stared at the high ceiling and thought the whole explosive Thanksgiving dinner had been a vivid, terrible nightmare. Then I sat up, saw my silver laptop still open on the glass coffee table, and the memory of the mass purge came rushing back to me. I reached over and picked up my phone from the floor. It was an absolute, unmitigated war zone. The screen was completely lit up with notifications. 37 missed calls. 52 unread text messages. The notifications were a rapid waterfall of escalating panic, deep confusion, and absolute rage. I walked into my kitchen, started the coffee maker, and leaned against the counter. I opened the messages and began reading them with a detached, almost scientific sense of curiosity. It felt exactly like watching a National Geographic nature documentary about a pride of arrogant lions who had just woken up to discover their only reliable food source had magically vanished into thin air. Mom, 7:15 a.m., Blythe, the internet router is completely down. I cannot log on to my iPad to watch my morning shows. Did you forget to pay the bill? Call the company immediately and fix it. Mom, 7:30 a.m., the smart coffee maker plug is completely offline too. Nothing is connecting. Call me right now, this is incredibly annoying. Dad, 8 a.m., your mother is in an absolute panic. Whatever childish, vindictive game you are playing this morning, it stops right now. Turn everything back on immediately or there will be serious consequences. Delphine, 8:05 a.m., seriously, dude? Not cool at all. I desperately need the Wi-Fi to work on my pitch deck for the app. Stop acting like a baby and turn the router back on. I took a slow sip of my hot, black coffee. The rich, bitter taste grounded me. They were not sad that we had fought. They were not calling to apologize for screaming at me and kicking me out into the cold on a holiday. They were entirely unapologetic. They were just furious that the golden goose had stopped laying the eggs. I continued scrolling down. The tone of the messages dramatically shifted around 9 o'clock. Mom, 9 a.m., Blythe. Respond to me right now. The car will not start. I tried to take the sedan to the grocery store and the engine is locked. Did you do something to the electronics? Call me. I almost chuckled. The auto loan company had a remote starter disable feature for missed payments. I had cancelled the payment, and since the account was flagged, they must have remotely locked the ignition. But the absolute best message came 10 minutes later. It was typed entirely in frantic capital letters. Mom, 9:15 a.m., they are towing the car. Blythe, a truck is in the driveway and they are towing my sedan away. The neighbors are all outside watching. Do something immediately. You are ruining us. I walked over to my large floor-to-ceiling window, which overlooked the bustling, anonymous city streets, far away from the quiet, gossiping suburban cul-de-sac where my mother was currently having a public meltdown. I took another long, satisfying sip of my coffee. I was not going to do absolutely anything. They wanted to be entirely independent from me. They were getting exactly what they demanded. I placed my empty coffee mug in the sink when a new voicemail icon popped up on my screen. It was from an unknown, local suburban phone number. I tapped play, holding the phone to my ear. Miss Blythe, a deep, authoritative male voice said. This is Officer Schmidt with the local police department. I am currently standing at your parents' residence. They have filed a formal police report regarding a potential malicious hacking and cyber attack on their home security and internet systems. Could you please give the station a call back at your earliest convenience to clarify a few things? Thank you. I actually had to cover my mouth to stop from laughing out loud. They had actually dialed 911. My parents were so incredibly incapable of taking basic personal responsibility for their own lives that their very first assumption was that a complex, criminal cyber attack had occurred, rather than accepting the simple, logical consequence of their own arrogant actions. They truly believed I was legally obligated to provide them with high-speed internet. I did not call the officer back. Instead, I typed out a very polite, highly professional text message to the number he called from. Officer Schmidt, this is Blythe. I am the sole account holder and the person financially responsible for the internet, utilities, and security accounts at that address. I voluntarily canceled my own services last night. No hacking occurred. My parents simply no longer have my permission to use my paid accounts. Have a safe holiday weekend. I hit send. I knew instantly that the police would pack up and leave. It was a civil matter, and a completely legal one at that. Less than an hour later, another voicemail arrived. This one was from Harlan. His voice was no longer shouting with blind rage. It was cold, menacing, and filled with a terrifying, legalistic fury. He must have spent the morning frantically watching daytime legal dramas on the television that still worked. Blythe, his voice crackled aggressively through the speaker. You listen to me very carefully. I just spoke to a friend of mine who knows the law. What you are doing right now is illegal. It is called elder financial abuse. You have a strict fiduciary duty to provide for us after doing so for 8 years. I am hiring a vicious lawyer. We will take you to civil court. We will garnish your high salary. You will not get away with trying to destroy this family. Elder financial abuse. A lawyer. The sheer, unadulterated audacity of his words was breathtaking. They had violently thrown me out of their house, screamed that I was not family, and permanently disowned me. And now, less than 12 hours later, they were planning to legally sue me for respecting their exact wishes. This was no longer just a sad family dispute over a turkey dinner. This was all-out war. And the best part was, I held every single weapon in the entire arsenal. The threats of legal action were incredibly unsettling to hear, but I knew deep down they were completely hollow. I had actually consulted with a corporate lawyer buddy of mine years ago when I first started paying their massive bills, just to understand the potential tax implications. He had clearly told me that since I was giving them the money entirely voluntarily, with absolutely no written contract or legal obligation, I could stop at any time I pleased. I was not their legal guardian. I was just a walking ATM. Harlan's angry threats were just desperate noise from a drowning man. The empty legal threats I could easily handle. The emotional manipulation, however, was a completely different, far more dangerous beast. Late that Friday afternoon, the barrage of frantic calls and angry texts had finally slowed down. I was sitting on my couch, reading through my new corporate partnership documents, feeling a sense of deep peace. Then, my phone buzzed with a single new text message from Vesta. I glanced at the screen, expecting more demands about the towed car. But this message was entirely different from the others. It was not angry. It was not demanding. It was absolutely terrifying. Mom, 4:30 p.m., Blythe, please pick up the phone. Please. It is your father. He is in the hospital. He is having severe chest pains. He completely collapsed in the kitchen this morning after the stress of the police and the car being taken. The doctors say it is a major heart attack. Please, just call me. We need you here. My blood instantly ran completely cold. The phone felt like a block of ice in my hand. This was the one single scenario I was deeply afraid of. What if the shock of losing everything overnight had actually caused a severe medical emergency? The guilt, that familiar, heavy, suffocating cloak that had draped over my shoulders for 32 years, instantly settled over me, crushing my chest. Had I actually caused this? Did I push an aging man too far? My hand visibly trembled as my thumb hovered anxiously over Vesta's contact number. I was seconds away from hitting the green call button. Despite all their awfulness, all their cruelty, and all the manipulation, he was still my dad. The thought of him dying on a hospital bed because I canceled a payment made me feel physically sick to my stomach. But then, just as I was about to call, Marnie's stern voice echoed loudly in my head. Cut the cord before your mother calls you tomorrow morning crying with some fake apology, or in this case, a fake medical emergency. My logical, engineering brain, the analytical part of me that had been forcibly dormant for so long whenever it came to family matters, violently kicked into gear. I stopped my thumb. I forced myself to think critically. If Harlan had truly collapsed with a major heart attack in the kitchen, Vesta would have frantically called an ambulance. She would have been riding in the back of the screaming ambulance, completely beside herself with terror. She would have been sitting in the chaotic emergency room. She absolutely would not have spent the entire morning and afternoon rapidly texting me in all caps about a towed sedan, a broken coffee maker, and a Wi-Fi router. With a sickening sense of dread in my stomach, I did something I absolutely should have done years ago. I checked the hard facts. I opened the internet browser on my phone and looked up the main switchboard numbers for the two largest medical hospitals in their suburban area. I dialed the first one. Hello, yes, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. I am trying to locate a family member. My father, Harlan. He was supposedly admitted to the emergency room this morning or afternoon for a severe cardiac issue. The operator typed loudly on her keyboard. I am checking the system now, ma'am. One moment. A few seconds passed. I am sorry, ma'am. We have absolutely no patient registered under that name in our facility today. I hung up and immediately dialed the second hospital. I asked the exact same question. The operator checked the entire critical care and emergency registry. I am very sorry, the second operator confirmed. We have no patient by that name admitted today. A wave of profound relief washed over me, so intensely potent that it actually made me physically dizzy. I had to sit down hard on the couch. He was not dying. He was fine. But immediately following the relief was a massive, dark tidal wave of pure, unadulterated, sickening rage. She had lied. Vesta had completely fabricated a life-threatening medical emergency. She had weaponized the most terrifying scenario in her arsenal, my father's health, his potential death, and my own lingering love for him, to try and emotionally terrorize me into calling her back and surrendering my money. She was trying to play on my conscience because her screaming and her police threats had failed. I leaned my head heavily against the wall, my phone clenched tightly in my fist. That was it. That was the very last, microscopic shred of familial duty or love I possessed. And Vesta had just gleefully severed it with a disgusting, manipulative lie. Just as I was processing the sheer depravity of the hospital lie, my phone rang again. It was not Vesta. It was my Aunt Odette, my mother's older sister. I hesitated, but I decided to answer it. I naively thought she might be calling as a neutral third party to mediate. I was completely wrong. Blythe, thank God you finally picked up the phone. Odette cried out, her voice shrill and dripping with panicked anxiety. You have to help them. You are completely destroying your parents. You do not understand what is actually going on over there. I think I have a pretty clear idea of what is going on, Aunt Odette, I said coldly, my voice devoid of any warmth. I stopped paying for their lives, and they are throwing a temper tantrum. No, you do not understand, she insisted loudly, her voice cracking. It is not just about the monthly utility bills or the cars. It is Delphine. It is that stupid cryptocurrency thing she did. I frowned, my brow furrowing. I know about the crypto, Odette. She lost 15,000 of their savings. It was stupid, but it is gone. No, Blythe, listen to me, Odette practically screamed into the phone. She did not just lose their retirement savings. Delphine took out a massive, high-interest personal loan in your father's name. She forged his signature online. She borrowed $65,000 to put into that fake internet money. The room seemed to spin slightly. $65,000. They have to make a massive balloon payment to the predatory lender by the end of December, Odette rambled on, completely spilling the family's darkest secret. That is exactly why they were so desperately pushing you to invest in her new fitness app at dinner. They needed a huge lump sum of cash from you to pay off the massive loan before the lender puts a lien on the property. If you do not pay them right now, they are going directly into foreclosure. They are going to lose the house for real this time, Blythe. You have to save them. And there it was. The final, ugly, desperate, sickening truth laid bare. This entire situation was not just about maintaining their comfortable, lazy suburban lifestyle. This was not about them wanting a free ride. This was about staving off complete and total financial ruin, brought on entirely by the criminal actions of their precious golden child. My financial support was never a luxury to them. It was the only thing aggressively plugging a massive, gaping hole in a sinking ship that they themselves had created and allowed Delphine to pilot. And instead of coming to me honestly, admitting their massive failure, and asking for help like adults, they were willing to lie, cheat, verbally abuse, and emotionally blackmail me to keep me blindly bailing water out of their disaster. Aunt Odette, I said, my voice shockingly calm. That sounds like a terrible problem for Delphine to solve. And I hung up the phone. I blocked Odette's number immediately. The puzzle was finally complete, and I was disgusted by the picture it formed. The 6 months that aggressively followed that chaotic Thanksgiving weekend were an absolute blur of establishing ironclad boundaries and slowly rediscovering myself as an independent human being. The horrifying revelation about Delphine's secret $65,000 loan was the final, heavy nail in the coffin of my old life. It completely absolved me of any lingering, annoying guilt. This was not a loving family I needed to graciously save. This was a toxic, sinking ship I needed to aggressively escape before it dragged me down to the bottom of the ocean. The very first thing I did on Monday morning was hire a highly rated family lawyer. I did not hire an aggressive attack dog, but a calm, professional attorney who understood toxic family dynamics. I paid him a retainer from my new millions, and he drafted a stark, legally binding cease and desist letter. It was addressed directly to Harlan, Vesta, and Delphine. It stated in clear legal terms that any further contact, whether by phone, text, email, or showing up at my residence or workplace, would be considered targeted harassment, and I would immediately file for a restraining order. It felt extreme when I signed the paper, but it was absolutely necessary. The daily barrage of hysterical calls, manipulative texts, and fake emergencies stopped entirely overnight. The silence was incredibly deafening at first. I kept expecting my phone to buzz. But eventually, the silence became incredibly peaceful. The second thing I did was take Marnie's excellent advice. I found a highly recommended therapist, a brilliant woman named Dr. Evans who specialized in family trauma, financial abuse, and narcissistic family dynamics. Our weekly Tuesday sessions became my sacred sanctuary. She helped me meticulously unpack decades of heavy emotional baggage I did not even fully realize I was carrying on my back. You were never their daughter, Blythe, Dr. Evans told me gently in one of our breakthrough sessions, handing me a tissue. You were their function. Your specific role in that house was to be the stable, low-maintenance, quiet financial provider. When you finally stopped performing that specific function, and demanded to be seen and respected as a human being, their entire parasitic system collapsed. So, they labeled you as the villain to avoid facing their own failures. It was a massive revelation. I was not the bad guy for walking away. I was just the very first person in that family to finally stop pretending the house was not on fire. With the toxic noise completely silenced, I started to aggressively rebuild my life. I focused heavily on my career, but with a completely different mindset. With the massive financial security of my cashed-out stock earnings, I actually declined the official corporate vice president promotion. The role would have kept me chained to a massive corporate structure, working 80-hour weeks for someone else's vision. Instead, I used my millions to lay the solid groundwork for my very own boutique technology consulting firm. I wanted to build something incredible for myself, entirely on my own terms. I also slowly began putting myself out there socially. A few months later, at a casual networking event for tech founders, I bumped into a man named Thaddeus. He was an architect, with kind eyes and a warm, genuine laugh. We started dating, and for the first time in my life, I experienced a relationship that was built on mutual respect, easy communication, and absolute equality. He never once made me feel guilty for the difficult choices I had made regarding my family. A full year later, exactly to the day of that fateful Thanksgiving explosion, I was sitting on my plush couch, looking out the window at the beautiful autumn leaves falling in the city. My life was completely unrecognizable from what it had been a year ago. My consulting firm was thriving beyond my wildest dreams. I was my own boss, setting my own hours, and building my own wealth. I had moved into a stunning, highly secure luxury building where my family absolutely did not have my address or access. That week, I had a long phone call with my Uncle Gideon, Harlan's estranged older brother. Gideon was a kind, quiet man who had distanced himself from my father's toxic pride decades ago. We spoke every few months, catching up on life. He had become the quiet, steady father figure I had always desperately craved. "You know, Blythe," Gideon said casually over the phone, sipping his tea. "I heard through the family grapevine about what finally happened with your parents." I braced myself, pulling my sweater tighter. "Oh yeah?" "Yeah," Gideon continued, his voice tinged with a sad sort of vindication. "They could not make that massive balloon payment on the loan Delphine took out. The bank foreclosed on the house. The house you paid for 8 years." I closed my eyes, feeling a strange mix of pity and closure. "They had to sell everything at a massive loss to avoid total bankruptcy," he said. "They are living in a tiny, cramped rental apartment on the bad side of town now. Harlan had to swallow his pride and take a brutal night shift job as a security guard at a warehouse. Vesta is working full-time at the dental clinic, complaining to anyone who will listen." "And Delphine?" I asked quietly. "Delphine is working the cash register at a big box sporting goods store," Gideon chuckled darkly. "Stocking shelves and wearing a polyester vest." The universe, it seems, has a very brutal sense of irony. They had gotten exactly what they fought so hard for. Their golden child, with all her boundless, imaginary potential, was finally having to pay her own bills. Gideon also revealed one last, sickening secret. He told me that Aunt Odette, the woman who had called me in a panic, the supposedly supportive aunt, had actually been the main architect of my misery. For years, whenever Vesta complained about money, Odette would maliciously whisper in her ear, "Do not worry, Vesta. Blythe makes a huge salary in the city. She is rich. It is the very least she can do to pay you back after all you did to raise her." Odette had been actively pouring gasoline on the fire the entire time, feeding Vesta's entitlement while smiling sweetly to my face. It was the final, sad piece of the puzzle. But the amazing thing was, I was not even angry anymore. I just felt a profound, overwhelming sense of pity for all of them. They were a pathetic group of people so deeply trapped in their own bitter resentments and delusions that they had to constantly tear someone else down just to feel important. I thought about the concept of a family inheritance. I once thought an inheritance was about receiving money, property, or a college fund passed down from your parents. Now, I knew the dark truth. Their real inheritance to me was a toxic legacy of severe dysfunction, manipulation, and financial abuse. And I was just incredibly, remarkably lucky that I had managed to aggressively refuse it before it destroyed me. Later that evening, Thaddeus and I were walking through a beautiful city park, the crisp autumn leaves crunching loudly under our boots. "What are you thinking about so intensely?" he asked, warmly squeezing my gloved hand. I looked up at him, at the genuine, uncomplicated affection shining in his eyes. "I was just thinking about how incredibly thankful I am," I said, a soft smile touching my lips. "Getting a very early start on Thanksgiving?" he teased gently. "Something exactly like that," I replied, leaning my head against his shoulder as we walked. I am thankful for second chances. I am thankful for real, authentic connections. I am thankful for building a beautiful life that finally feels entirely like my own. A year ago, I had violently lost a biological family. But in the incredibly painful process of walking away, I had finally found myself, and I would not trade that discovery for all the money in the world. I was no longer the invisible daughter. I was no longer the family ATM. I was just Blythe. And for the very first time in my 32 years of life, that felt like more than enough. It is strange how life ultimately works out. For so long, I firmly believed that family was an unbreakable, sacred blood obligation that you were just born into. I thought love meant silently enduring any amount of pain, disrespect, and abuse because that is just what you are supposed to do for your family. I was completely wrong. I learned the hard way that true family is absolutely not about blood. It is about mutual respect. It is about reciprocity. It is about the people who truly see you, who celebrate your victories without a shred of jealousy, and who support you when you fall without expecting a massive paycheck in return. It is the family you actively choose. The one you build with your own two hands. My family is now made up of fiercely loyal friends like Marnie, who tell me the brutal hard truths when I need to hear them. It includes wise relatives like Uncle Gideon, who offer warm support without any toxic judgment. And a partner like Thaddeus, who loves me simply for who I am, and not for what I can financially provide. I do sometimes wonder what Harlan, Vesta, and Delphine are doing right now. I imagine them sitting in their small, cramped rental apartment, the harsh reality of their arrogant choices sitting with them like a constant, unwelcome guest. I heard from Gideon that they actually sent a generic Christmas card to my old apartment address a month after the blow-up. There was absolutely no apology inside. Just a passive-aggressive, guilt-tripping note about how the holidays just were not the same, and an arrogant expectation that I would eventually come crawling back to them with my wallet open. I never responded. My healing process required massive distance and a completely clean break from the toxicity that had defined my life for so long. I do not hate them. I honestly do not think I do. What I feel is a deep, abiding sadness for what we could have been if they had just loved me, and a profound, unshakable sense of peace in finally accepting what we actually were. Walking away from that dining room table was the single hardest thing I have ever had to do in my life. But it was also the single greatest act of self-love and preservation I have ever committed. It allowed me to stop being a tragic supporting character in their endless drama, and finally step up to become the main character in my own beautiful life. The biggest, most delicious irony of it all is that, by violently disowning me, my father accidentally gave me the one single thing I had always desperately craved from him. Freedom. The total freedom to define my own worth, to build my own massive wealth, and to create a loving family that is a safe harbor, not a constant battlefield. And for that, in a very strange, twisted way, I will always be incredibly grateful to him. Thank you so much for listening to my story. I know it was a very long and difficult journey, but your time and attention mean the absolute world to me. I truly hope this story has touched you in some way, or maybe given you the courage to make a hard choice in your own life. I have one final question for you. Have you ever been in a situation where you had to make the impossible choice between your own mental well-being and a deeply toxic family obligation? Let me know in the comments below. Sharing your own story can be incredibly powerful and healing for all of us. And please do not forget to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel so you do not miss what comes next. Take care of yourselves, and remember your worth.